Jennifer Kesse, Orlando, Florida, January 24, 2006. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old, a finance manager at a Central Florida investment firm, organized and responsible, living alone in a gated condominium community called the Mosaic at Millennia in Orlando. On the evening of January 23, 2006, Jennifer left work around 6 p.m., spoke with her father during her drive home, and called her boyfriend around 10 p.m. that night. That was the last confirmed contact anyone had with her. What investigators believe happened next is this. Jennifer came home, went to sleep, and was alive the following morning. Her bathroom showed evidence of recent use: a wet towel, clothing laid out for the day, makeup and grooming tools visible on the counter. Someone had gotten ready for work. That person never made it to her car. Between 7:30 and 8 a.m. on January 24th, investigators believe Jennifer was abducted, most likely somewhere between her front door and her parking space. At approximately noon that same day, a security camera at an apartment complex, roughly a mile from Jennifer's home, captured footage of an unidentified person parking her 2004 Chevy Malibu in the lot and walking away. That footage became the most examined piece of evidence in the case, and also its most frustrating. The camera angle, combined with chain-link fencing in the foreground, completely obscured the person's face. Forensic enhancement by NASA imaging specialists and the FBI managed to narrow the individual's estimated height to between 5'3" and 5'5". That was the limit of what technology could offer. No face, no identity, no clear clothing description. A figure who parked a missing woman's car in a lot a mile from her home, walked away, and was never identified. Jennifer's Malibu was found 2 days later, when a resident of the complex reported that the vehicle had been sitting there without moving. Police confirmed ownership. Inside, investigators found a single latent fingerprint and a small fiber. The car appeared to have been wiped down. Jennifer's purse, her iPod, and her keys were all missing, but items of obvious resale value inside the vehicle had been left untouched. There was no suggestion of a robbery. A K9 scent trail led from the abandoned car back in the direction of Jennifer's condominium, but produced no usable endpoint. Investigators questioned Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, her current boyfriend, co-workers, a workplace manager, and multiple construction workers employed at her condo complex at the time of her disappearance. The construction workers had reportedly made Jennifer uncomfortable. She had mentioned feeling harassed, but language barriers complicated those interviews, and no charges were ever filed against anyone. The FBI assumed control of the investigation in 2010. In 2018, Jennifer's family filed a legal action to access the case files, eventually obtaining over 16,000 pages of records. Those records revealed that between 2012 and 2019, the investigation had largely stalled. In December 2022, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement took over the case, bringing advanced evidence retesting techniques and a new round of witness interviews. In May 2025, FDLE announced the case was no longer considered cold. Multiple persons of interest had been identified, and previously untested evidence had been uncovered. The announcement offered the most cautious possible hope: progress, but no arrest. Jennifer Kesse's face appeared on that camera. Someone parked her car 1 mile from her home and walked away on a Tuesday morning in January 2006. The fence was in the wrong place. The angle was slightly off. In nearly 20 years of investigation, that moment, a few seconds of footage, has remained the closest anyone has come to knowing who took her. If you're new here, welcome. Subscribe to Truth and Evidence Crime Cases and hit that notification bell. We cover true crime, cold cases, and the evidence that raises the hardest questions. New episodes every week. You don't want to miss what's coming. Brianna Maitland, Montgomery, Vermont, March 19, 2004. Brianna Maitland was 17 years old. She had recently changed schools, moved in with friends, and was working as a dishwasher at the Black Lantern Inn, a small restaurant in the rural town of Montgomery, Vermont. She was navigating a difficult period. managing more than most teenagers are asked to handle, and still showing up for her shifts. On the evening of March 19, 2004, Brianna clocked out just after 11 p.m. and got into her green 1985 Oldsmobile, registered to her mother. She was expected at the house in Sheldon, where she was staying with a friend. She never arrived. The following morning, March 20th, Brianna's Oldsmobile was found approximately a mile from the inn, backed into the side of the old Dutchburn house, an abandoned farmhouse off Route 118. The car had struck the building with enough force to embed itself partially into the wooden siding. Inside the vehicle, coins, a water bottle, an unlit cigarette, and 2 uncashed paychecks. Her migraine medication was on the seat. Her keys were missing. A piece of plywood that had been covering a broken window in the old building was found resting against the car's trunk, a detail that has never been satisfactorily explained. Police initially treated the scene as a possible minor accident or vehicle abandonment. The car was towed. The site was not immediately secured as a crime scene. 4 days would pass before Brianna's mother, unable to reach her daughter, reported her missing. By then, the window for early forensic recovery had largely closed. In 2016, investigators revealed that a DNA sample had been recovered from inside Brianna's car. 6 years later, in 2022, Vermont State Police announced that the profile matched one of 11 previously tested persons of interest. That person has never been publicly named. No charges have been filed. Other investigative threads have also stalled. A search of a property connected to known local drug activity turned up narcotics, but no sign of Brianna. In 2012, the FBI examined whether serial killer Israel Keyes, who operated in the Northeast, had any connection to the case. He was ruled out. The old Dutchburn house, which might have held additional evidence, burned down in 2016. Witness accounts describe a man standing beside the car after it was backed into the farmhouse. A silver Honda Civic, seen leaving the area. Headlights visible near midnight. None of these accounts have ever produced a verifiable lead. In 2024, on the 20th anniversary of Brianna's disappearance, the FBI offered a $40,000 reward for information. The case remains active. Brianna Maitland's car was found backed into an abandoned farmhouse with everything she owned still inside, her paychecks uncashed, her medication on the seat. A DNA sample from that car matches someone investigators have already spoken to, and that person has still not been charged. The farmhouse has burned. The car is gone. The answer, investigators say, is still out there. Emma Fillipoff, Victoria, British Columbia, November 28, 2012. Emma Fillipoff was 26 years old and living a transient life in Victoria, British Columbia, staying at women's shelters, on boats, occasionally in the woods, working seasonal jobs, keeping journals, making art. She had relocated from Perth, Ontario the previous year and was by November 2012 showing signs of serious psychological distress that those around her were struggling to interpret or address. In the days before she disappeared, Emma called her mother repeatedly from Victoria, alternating between asking to come home and then changing her mind. Something was clearly wrong. The question of what exactly that something was has never been answered. On November 28, 2012, Emma moved her red 1993 Mazda MPV to the parking lot of the Chateau Victoria Hotel, loading most of her belongings into the vehicle. What she was preparing for, or running from, is unknown. At 8:23 that morning, surveillance cameras at a nearby 7-Eleven captured Emma purchasing a $200 prepaid credit card while nervously watching the door. She appeared disoriented. Acquaintances who saw her later that day near Pandora Street described her as fragmented, carrying multiple bags, appearing incapable of sustained conversation. By evening, Emma had returned to the Sandy Merriman House Women's Shelter, but when she learned her mother was traveling from Ontario to find her, she became upset and left. She hailed a taxi, told the driver to go to the airport, changed her mind. said she couldn't pay, asked to go back. The driver later told investigators she grew increasingly anxious listening to the taxi's dispatch radio. At approximately 7 p.m., Victoria police officers encountered Emma standing outside the Empress Hotel, barefoot, holding her shoes. They interviewed her for 45 minutes. She identified herself, said she was out for a walk, said she planned to meet a friend. She declined any further assistance. She walked away from that conversation and was never seen again. The following morning, Emma's van was found in the Chateau Victoria parking lot. Inside, her passport, laptop, camera, clothing, books, and every personal journal she had kept. The prepaid credit card she had purchased that morning was later used by a man who claimed to have found it on the road. He was interviewed and cleared. Over 200 leads have been investigated. In 2014, surveillance footage from Vancouver's Gastown district showed an unidentified man removing an Emma Fillipoff missing person poster and claiming she was his girlfriend. That man, known in the case as the Green Shirt Man, has never been identified and remains a person of interest. One tip from 2018 described a man giving a distressed young woman, matching Emma's description, a ride early on November 29th, dropping her off near Colwood, west of Victoria. Searches in the area found nothing. Victoria police officers spoke to Emma Fillipoff for 45 minutes outside the Empress Hotel. They assessed her. They offered help. She said she was fine and walked away. Whatever happened in the hours after that conversation has never been established. Her passport, her journals, her camera, everything she owned was in that parking lot van. She walked away from all of it barefoot, in November rain. You're watching Truth and Evidence, Crime Cases. These cases represent real families fighting for answers in cases the system has struggled to close. Subscribe if you haven't, share this video, and help keep these stories visible. Lindsay Buziak, Saanich, British Columbia, February 2, 2008. Lindsay Buziak was 24 years old, ambitious, outgoing, and building a real estate career with Remax Kesse in Victoria, British Columbia. She was dating a fellow agent named Jason Zalo, and by the early evening of February 2, 2008, she had a showing scheduled at a vacant property in Saanich's Gordon Head area. The clients, a woman with a foreign accent and her male companion, had contacted Lindsay days earlier through a call that left her uneasy. She didn't recognize the number. She wasn't sure how they had obtained her contact information. But she confirmed the appointment. She drove to 1702 D'Souza Place at around 5:30 p.m. and greeted the couple at the door. Witnesses who saw the handshake at the entrance later described it as the greeting of strangers. Formal, brief, unfamiliar. All three entered the house. The coroner established Lindsay's time of death at approximately 5:40 p.m., within 10 minutes of entering the property. She had been stabbed multiple times in the master bedroom. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting she was caught completely off guard, struck from behind or by surprise. The attack had been fast and deliberate. The killers left no traceable DNA. No fingerprints. No murder weapon was recovered. Bloody footprints were documented at the scene, but they led investigators no further than the exits. Jason Zalo arrived at the property shortly after 5:40 p.m. with a colleague. He reported seeing movement through the glass door but did not immediately approach. He parked, sent Lindsay a text, waited roughly 10 minutes, then circled the block. When he returned, the front door was locked. He and his colleague accessed the property through an open patio door at the rear and found Lindsay upstairs. Police were called at 6:11 p.m. Paramedics arrived. Lindsay was already gone. The phone used to arrange the showing was a prepaid cell purchased months earlier in Vancouver under the alias Paulo Rodriguez. It had been used only to contact Lindsay. Cell tower data traced its movement to Vancouver Island before the murder. It was deactivated immediately after the crime and never used again. Investigators also noted that Lindsay's Facebook and online activity had stopped abruptly 2 weeks before her murder. Unusual behavior for someone known for regular digital engagement. Some messages were found to be missing from her laptop. The client couple who entered that house with Lindsay has never been identified. The man and woman were last seen walking away from the cul-de-sac, possibly exiting through the rear of the property. Saanich police have publicly stated they believe the murder was targeted and personally motivated, not a contract killing. In 2021, they announced renewed investigative efforts in partnership with the RCMP and FBI, leveraging advances in DNA analysis and forensic technology. No one has ever been charged. Lindsay Buziak shook hands with two strangers at a show home door at 5:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday. She was dead 10 minutes later. The phone they used to reach her was registered to a false name and was never used again. The couple walked out of a cul-de-sac and disappeared. 17 years later, their identities remain unknown. Maura Murray, Haverhill, New Hampshire, February 9, 2004. Maura Murray was 21 years old, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a track athlete, and by the first weeks of February 2004, a young woman in the middle of something she hadn't told anyone about. In the days immediately before her disappearance, her behavior had shifted noticeably. On February 5th, she was visibly distressed by a late-night phone call from her sister. That same night, she crashed her father's car near campus and told him the next day she had slid on sand. Her mood remained troubled in the days that followed. On February 9th, Maura's actions were precise and puzzling in equal measure. She submitted a homework assignment at 3:32 in the morning. By lunchtime, she was calling about rental properties in Vermont and messaging her boyfriend. At 1:24 p.m., she sent an email to her professors, claiming she would be away for a week due to a death in the family. There was no death. The reason she gave was false. That afternoon, she withdrew nearly all her available cash, redeemed bottles at a liquor store, bought alcohol, and drove north out of Massachusetts alone in her black Saturn sedan. She drove nearly 140 miles into the White Mountains of New Hampshire. At approximately 7:20 p.m., Maura's Saturn went off Route 112 outside the small town of Haverhill, striking a snowbank on a remote stretch of road where the nearest house is not visible from the crash site. A local resident heard the accident and called 911. A school bus driver named Butch Atwood stopped to offer help. Maura declined. She told him she had already called for roadside assistance. Phone records later confirmed no such call was made. Atwood drove to a nearby house to contact police. Officers arrived at 7:46 p.m., within approximately 19 minutes of the accident being reported. Maura was gone. The car was locked. The airbags had deployed. Inside, her textbooks, medications, a change of clothes, printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, accident report forms she had collected earlier that day, and a Coke bottle containing red liquid believed to be wine. No footprints were visible in the snow leading away from the vehicle. Scent trails established by search dogs stopped abruptly within a short distance. The search that followed involved police, cadaver dogs, hundreds of volunteers, and extensive media coverage. The woods, rivers, and roads of northern New Hampshire were methodically searched. Nothing was ever found. The theories are numerous and sincerely debated. Was Maura planning to disappear voluntarily, overwhelmed by personal pressures and looking for an exit? Did she leave the car and become lost or injured in the winter landscape? Or did someone stop on that dark stretch of road during the 19-minute window between the accident report and the arrival of police? No theory has been confirmed or definitively ruled out. Maura's father, Fred Murray, has organized annual searches and pressed law enforcement for movement on the case for more than 2 decades. Independent investigators, podcasters, and a large online community have kept the case in public view. In 2024, the FBI issued a new VICAP alert on the case, reaffirming it as an active, open investigation. Maura Murray drove alone into the White Mountains with cash, alcohol, and false explanations already sent to her professors. Her car struck a snowbank on a road where no one could see her from any house. A man stopped and offered help. She said she was fine. 19 minutes later, police arrived. She was gone. The footprints stopped. The scent stopped. 20 years later, the questions haven't. Madeleine McCann, Praia da Luz, Portugal, May 3, 2007. Madeleine McCann was 3 years old. She had turned 3 just 12 days before her family flew to Portugal for a holiday. Her parents, Jerry and Kate McCann, both doctors from the UK, were staying at apartment 5A of a quiet resort complex in Praia da Luz, with Madeleine and her younger twin siblings, along with a group of family friends. On the evening of May 3, 2007, the children were put to bed at approximately 7 p.m. The adults went to dine at a tapas restaurant 55 meters away from the apartment. They maintained a system of regular checks on the children throughout the evening. At approximately 10 p.m., Kate McCann went to check on her children. Madeleine's bed was empty. The window was open. Madeleine was gone. The alarm was raised immediately. Resort staff, guests, and neighbors began searching within minutes. Portuguese police arrived within the hour, followed by criminal investigators. British media and law enforcement became deeply involved within days. Despite the speed of the response, no physical trace of Madeleine was found in the first hours, or the first days, or the weeks that followed. Sniffer and cadaver dogs were eventually brought in. According to investigators' reports, the dogs made alerts in locations within the apartment and in a car rented by the McCanns weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. Those findings became deeply contested, the evidential significance debated by forensic experts, challenged by the McCann family, and never definitively resolved in any legal proceeding. Robert Maura, a British expat living near the resort, was made a formal suspect in the early investigation and later cleared. The McCanns themselves were named as formal suspects in September 2007. That status was lifted a year later. No charges were ever filed against them. In 2020, German prosecutors publicly named Christian Bruckner, a German national with an extensive criminal record who had been living in the Algarve at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, as the prime suspect. Phone data and materials reportedly recovered from his property were cited. In 2025, large-scale excavations near his former home in Portugal were conducted. They produced no conclusive findings linking Bruckner to Madeleine's disappearance. Shortly after, Bruckner was released from a German prison after serving a sentence for an unrelated conviction. He has not been charged in connection with Madeleine McCann. The investigation remains active, with Portuguese, British, and German authorities continuing to share information and pursue leads. Every few years, a new search effort or announcement generates global attention and then resolves into the same silence. Madeleine McCann's parents were eating dinner 55 meters from where she slept. The window was open. She was 3 years old. Nearly 18 years later, no one has been convicted, no remains have been found, and the prime suspect in the most recent phase of the investigation has walked free. The question of what happened in that apartment between the last check and 10 p.m. has never been answered. This is Truth and Evidence, Crime Cases. We're past the halfway point. 4 more cases to go. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you're notified the moment our next episode drops. Kyron Horman, Portland, Oregon, June 4, 2010. Kyron Horman was 7 years old. On the morning of June 4, 2010, his stepmother, Terry Horman, drove him to Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon for the school's science fair. Kyron had prepared a project. He was excited. Terry stayed with him as he set up his display. She took photographs, images she would later upload to Facebook. At approximately 8:45 a.m., she later told investigators she watched Kyron walk down the hallway toward his classroom. That was, according to Terry, the last time she saw him. Kyron Horman never appeared in his classroom. The school had no confirmed surveillance footage of him after the morning drop-off. His teacher had no record of him being present that day. When the afternoon school bus arrived without Kyron, His family went to the stop to meet him. He wasn't on it. They called the school. At 3 p.m., a school employee called 911. Police arrived within minutes. The Multnomah County Sheriff's search and rescue team joined within hours. The FBI was called in before 9 p.m. that evening. In the days that followed, more than 1,300 volunteers searched the dense wooded areas surrounding Skyline Elementary, nearby neighborhoods, rural roads, and even Sauvie Island, a rural area across the Columbia River. Sonar equipment was deployed on waterways. A $50,000 reward was offered for information. No physical trace of Kyron was ever found. No clothing, no backpack, no remains. As weeks passed without answers, investigative attention turned increasingly toward Terry Horman. Detectives scrutinized her timeline for the hours after she left the school, comparing receipts, gym records, and phone logs against her stated account of running errands, driving her infant daughter around, and working out. Some witnesses claimed to have seen another person in Terry's truck outside the school that morning. Those accounts were never verified. A family landscaper later alleged that Terry had approached him months before Kyron's disappearance with a request that he kill her husband, Kyron's father, Kane. No charges related to that allegation were ever filed. A friend of Terry's was subpoenaed by a grand jury after reports surfaced that she may have helped Terry acquire an untraceable phone. No charges followed. Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, filed a civil suit against Terry alleging kidnapping, and later withdrew it to avoid interfering with the criminal investigation. Terry Horman has never been charged with any crime related to Kyron's disappearance. In 2025, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office began digitizing the entire case file, all reports, tip line records, and investigative notes, with the intent of having the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit conduct a full review. The $50,000 reward remains active. Kyron Horman walked down a school hallway at 8:45 on a Friday morning and was never seen again. His stepmother photographed him at the science fair. His teacher never saw him in class. The school had no footage of him after the drop-off. More than 15 years later, no one has been charged. No remains have been found, and the investigation is still officially active. Relisha Rudd, Washington, D.C., March 1, 2014. Relisha Rudd was 8 years old. She lived with her mother and siblings at D.C. General Family Shelter, a converted hospital complex in the nation's capital that served as emergency housing for hundreds of displaced families. Life there was chaotic and overcrowded, and Relisha's family had already been known to social services for issues of neglect and instability. Within the shelter, Relisha and her family had come to know a man named Khalil Tatum, a janitor in his early 50s who had attached himself to the family, giving Relisha gifts, taking her on outings, and gradually building a level of access to her that no adult outside her family should have had. When Relisha began missing school in early 2014, her mother and Tatum told school staff she was sick, under the care of a doctor. They gave his name as Dr. Tatum. Nobody verified the credential. Nobody called the number. For weeks, the deception held. The last confirmed sighting of Relisha Rudd alive was captured on hotel surveillance footage on March 1, 2014. The footage showed Relisha walking quietly down a corridor alongside Khalil Tatum. She was never seen again. On March 10th, Tatum told school officials she would return soon. On March 13th, after 10 consecutive days of unexcused absences, Relisha's family was finally reported to the city's Child and Family Services Agency for educational neglect. By then, the trail was already cold. On March 19th, a social worker arrived at the shelter to meet with the supposed Dr. Tatum. He did not appear. The next day, police found Tatum's wife, Andrea, dead from a gunshot wound in a Maryland motel room. By March 31st, Tatum himself was found dead in a Washington, D.C. park, an apparent suicide with the same weapon used to kill Andrea. In the days between Tatum's death and when his body was discovered, investigators pieced together a disturbing picture of his final movements. Reports indicated he had purchased trash bags, lime, and a shovel. Searches of parks, waterways, hotels, and the shelter itself found no trace of Relisha. Multiple agencies reviewed the case: D.C. police, the FBI, and city officials. Their findings identified breakdowns at nearly every stage. School absences were accepted at face value. Interagency communication had failed. Prior warnings about Relisha's home situation had not generated adequate protective action. Relisha Rudd has never been found. No remains have been recovered. No charges have been filed. The only person investigators considered responsible died before they could question him. Relisha Rudd was 8 years old, living in a shelter in the nation's capital, surrounded by social services systems that were supposed to protect her. A janitor forged a doctor's identity and used it to keep her out of school and out of sight for weeks. The last image of her is a hotel corridor on a Saturday. The man walking beside her was dead within the month. Relisha has never come home. Lauren Spierer, Bloomington, Indiana, June 3, 2011. Lauren Spierer was 20 years old, a petite college student at Indiana University studying textile merchandising. She was from New York, known for her warmth and her close group of friends, and had a rare heart condition that made heavy intoxication particularly dangerous for her physically. On the night of June 2nd into the early morning of June 3, 2011, Lauren attended a party at a friend's apartment and later went to Kilroy's sports bar. Surveillance cameras captured her inside the bar at 1:46 a.m. She was visibly enjoying herself, consuming alcohol and, according to later interviews, drugs. At 2:27 a.m., Lauren left the bar with a fellow student named Corey Rossman. She left her phone and her shoes behind, indicators of significant intoxication. Cameras captured the two of them walking through an alley and into a vacant lot near her apartment complex. That was the last time Lauren Spierer was definitively seen on camera. Between approximately 2:51 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., the confirmed record of Lauren's movements breaks down entirely. Some witnesses reported seeing a barefoot young woman in black leggings and a white shirt stumbling south on College Avenue. Rossman later stated he had been punched and suffered memory loss, accounting for a gap in his account of the night. Other friends present that evening were questioned extensively. DNA samples were taken. None were ever charged. When Lauren failed to return home that morning, her friends raised the alarm. Her parents arrived from New York. Flyers went up across Bloomington within hours. Police and volunteers launched a search that included bars, alleyways, and the surrounding campus neighborhoods. In August 2011, investigators spent 9 days searching a landfill in Martinsville. No evidence of Lauren was found. A 2016 search of a rural property connected to a person of interest involved cadaver dogs and excavation, also without result. Lauren's family filed a civil lawsuit against the young men who were last with her, alleging negligence. Courts dismissed the suit, ruling the connection between their actions and Lauren's fate too speculative to meet the legal threshold. A 2024 book on the case included new interviews with individuals who supplied Lauren with drugs that night. Those revelations did not produce a legal breakthrough. Lauren Spierer has never been found. No remains, no clothing, no personal items have ever been recovered. Without a body, every theory, accidental death, foul play, abduction, a cover-up by those present, remains exactly that. A theory. Lauren Spierer left a bar at 2:27 in the morning without her shoes or her phone, in a condition that made her physically vulnerable. The cameras caught her entering an alley. After that, the record stops. The people who were with her in those final hours gave accounts marked by gaps and memory loss. Nobody has been charged. Nobody has come forward. Lauren has never been found. Sarm Heslop, St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands, March 7, 2021. Sarm Heslop was 41 years old. A British woman, former flight attendant, now working as a chef and first mate aboard a catamaran called the Siren Song, moored in the waters of Coral Bay, St. John. She was in a relationship with the boat's owner, an American man named Ryan Bain. Friends described Sarm as adventurous, capable, and careful. She had a distinctive tattoo on her shoulder, a seahorse, butterfly, and flower, that made her easily identifiable. By every account given by people who knew her, she was not the type to disappear without a word. On the evening of March 7, 2021, Sarm and Ryan Bain dined ashore in St. John. CCTV footage would later show the couple walking hand in hand down a dock at 8:45 p.m., boarding their dinghy to return to the siren song. That detail matters, because Bain initially told investigators they had returned to the boat closer to 10 p.m., a discrepancy of over an hour. One that has never been explained. Back aboard the siren song, Bain says the two went to sleep. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., he claimed to have been awakened by the anchor alarm. He checked the boat. Sarm was not there. At 2:35 a.m., he called local police. He waited another 9 hours before contacting the U.S. Coast Guard to request marine search support. No explanation for that 9-hour delay has ever been publicly provided. Local authorities responded that night and searched the surrounding waters and shoreline. The siren song itself was not searched on that first night. Bain, on advice from his attorney, subsequently resisted or delayed full forensic examination of the vessel. In the weeks and months that followed, he moved the boat, renamed it, and attempted to sell it. Sarm's passport, her phone, her wallet, and all her money were found aboard the boat. None of her clothing or personal effects were ever recovered from the water. Reports emerged that after Sarm's disappearance, Bain replaced portions of the boat's interior, including the freezer. Whether evidence was lost or destroyed in the process has never been determined, because the boat was not secured as a crime scene in time to prevent those changes. 9 days after Sarm disappeared, a local dog walker reported hearing a scream coming from the direction of where the siren song had been moored the night of March 7th. The report was logged and investigated. It was never conclusively linked to Sarm. In 2025, new CCTV footage was released, and a BBC documentary brought renewed international attention to the case. The footage contradicted elements of Bain's original account. Authorities in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the UK, and internationally continued to face pressure from Sarm's family to reclassify the case as a homicide. As of 2025, no charges have been filed. Ryan Bain has not been formally charged. Sarm Heslop remains classified as a missing person. Sarm Heslop went to dinner with her boyfriend, walked down a dock at 8:45 p.m., and was reported missing before 3 a.m. the same night. Her passport and money were on the boat. A 9-hour gap separated the first call to police and the call to the Coast Guard. The boat was moved before it was properly searched. A BBC documentary published footage that contradicted the account given by the only person known to be with her that night. Nobody has been charged. 10 cases, 3 countries, 5 decades of combined waiting. What makes these cases different from others we have covered is that in each of them, something exists. Surveillance footage, DNA samples, named persons of interest, phone records, forensic evidence from crime scenes or vehicles. The tools that were supposed to close cases like these. And still, not one arrest, not one conviction, not one family with a complete answer. Some of these cases are moving. Jennifer Kesse's file was reclassified in 2025 as no longer cold. Brianna Maitland's DNA match has been established. The name just hasn't been released. The FBI is actively reviewing Kyron Horman's case file. The Sarm Heslop footage was contradicted by newly released CCTV in the same year. Momentum is not the same as resolution, but it matters. If you have watched this episode and something is connecting, a detail, a name, a location, a memory from years ago that you never reported because you didn't think it would matter, the tip lines for every one of these cases are active. The investigators are still there. The families are still reachable. These are the names that deserve to be carried forward from this episode. Jennifer Kesse, Brianna Maitland, Emma Fillipoff, Lindsay Buziak, Maura Murray, Madeleine McCann, Kyron Horman, Relisha Rudd, Lauren Spierer, Sarm Heslop. 10 names, 10 open files, 10 families who have been waiting long enough. I'm your host. This has been Truth and Evidence Crime Cases. If this episode stayed with you, share it. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment below. Which of these cases do you think is closest to being solved? We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching Truth and Evidence Crime Cases. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video. Every view keeps these cases in front of new eyes. Every share might reach the person who has been holding something back. We'll keep covering these cases. See you next time.